Hi, my name is Richard Cook, and I've written a screenplay titled Forgiveness. A screenplay is the master blueprint for a movie. Mine is a historical drama, which means the setting and many of the events are real, but the main characters are fictional. Some of our very best movies have been historical dramas. Titanic, Saving Private Ryan, Gone with the Wind. What follows next is a 7-minute documentary about Oak Ridge, Tennessee during World War II, which is the setting for the screenplay. Then there's a very brief description of what happens to the main characters in my screenplay. And after that, I will tell you how you can help me turn this screenplay into a Hollywood blockbuster movie. It's a really cool story. I hope you enjoy it.
It is the greatest untold epic story in American history. In the fall of 1942, the federal government quietly bought 62,000 acres of farmland in an isolated East Tennessee river valley. Families were evicted in weeks from land their ancestors had farmed for generations. On this land, the government built, with amazing speed, a secret colony of 75,000 scientists, engineers, and laborers. The colony's mission? To end World War II. Recent graduates in the sciences were contacted by government agents. They were needed for a top-secret project of national importance during the deadliest conflict known to mankind. They were never told what the project was. Many started work in a matter of days. They got onto buses and trains, not knowing what they would be doing or their final destination. Their heroic journeys ended and also began in Oak Ridge. Many of the laborers were barely out of high school. Thousands were only recently out of college, and only a handful were out of their 40s. The average age? 27. No one knew they were working on a weapons program. They did not know Germany was racing to develop the same atomic weapon, but there were constant reminders of the stakes involved. Time mattered. American losses by the end of the war would equal a 9/11 attack every 5 days for 3.5 years. The program enriched uranium. The process demanded massive amounts of electricity. The largest steam plant in the world was built in 18 months to meet the demand. During the war, the secret colony consumed almost 10% of the nation's electrical supply. K-25, the largest of the enrichment plants, was completed in less than 2 years. Covering 44 acres, it was bigger than many of the farms it replaced. It was the largest building in the world. Scientists knew a nuclear accident would be catastrophic, so workers lived many miles from the plants. The 6th largest bus system in the country was built to ferry workers back and forth in the colony that did not exist. Out of nothing, the government built the 5th largest city in the state of Tennessee. At 96 square miles, it was larger than Baltimore. It would not appear on any map until years after the war. The pace was unrelenting, the scale unbelievable. In 30 short months, 10,000 homes were built. There were 13,000 workers in dormitories, 5,000 more in trailers, and 16,000 workers in barracks. At the peak, a home was completed every 30 minutes. In the spring of 1944, there were 47,000 construction workers in the colony that did not exist. Many of the workers were single, but families also came to the colony. The school system exploded. In 1943, there were 600 students. In 1944, 5,000. A year later, there were 11,000 students. Because it was a closed community, there were no home games. All games were away. No names were printed on the jerseys. The opposing team was never provided a roster of players. Security was tight. The project could not be infiltrated. Everyone 12 and older had an ID badge. 5,000 security personnel manned the gates and patrolled the hundreds of miles of barbed wire fences. Cameras were banned. A flashbulb going off aroused serious suspicion. The people who worked there were not drafted. They went to Oak Ridge voluntarily, and they could leave voluntarily too. Officials knew they must be kept happy. These domestic soldiers worked hard and played even harder. Tennis courts were built. Recreation halls were full. A symphony was established, as well as a theater. Dozens of clubs were formed. Athletic teams played almost every night. It was assumed the colony was temporary. Once its job was done, it would be abandoned. A hospital was built almost as an afterthought. There was no funeral home. They were all strangers when they arrived. They were isolated, they were young, they were dominated by hormones and fear. They fell in love, they married and started families. All in the whirlwind of a deadly war. The end of the war came swiftly. Japan surrendered in 8 days. You could tell what happened just by looking at the faces of the workers. They were happy again. The killing had stopped. Time did matter. It is time for this amazing story to be told. Before 9/11, there were 3 generations of Americans who did not know what it felt like to have their country attacked. People want to be inspired by ordinary citizens banding together to end a war. This is an epic story. The scale and speed of the effort reads almost like science fiction. It is a story made for the big screen. But as with any big story, it needs to be told in a small, intimate way. Richard Cook's screenplay tells the fictional story of one little boy whose family moves to Oak Ridge during the war. His father works in the largest building in the world. The young boy's world is shattered by the tragic, untimely death of his beloved father. 56 years later, that young boy, now an old man, loses a loved one at the World Trade Center. The screenplay is about a 65-year-old man who, while standing in the wreckage of the World Trade Center, while clutching a bundle of old family letters, begins to understand and begins to forgive his father.
So here's the problem. Producers and directors buy screenplays and turn them into movies. It is almost impossible to get screenplays into the hands of the right people in Hollywood because they work behind creative fortresses. They have to. But with your help, and with YouTube and Facebook, we can make those fortress walls just a little porous. Please send this YouTube link to everyone you know on the internet and ask them to do the same. As it flies across the internet universe, it will get into the hands of the right people. One day, someone like Tom Hanks or Steven Spielberg is going to get an email from a trusted business associate. It's going to say, "Tom, there's a video on YouTube you really must see." Oak Ridge is a sprawling, epic American odyssey. And my little story about a small boy losing his father is a poignant tale of grief and longing. In its scale, in its emotional depth, forgiveness is where Apollo 13 meets ordinary people. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your help. At the end of the credits, there is an email address where you can send comments to me. Keep your fingers crossed. This is the greatest untold epic story in American history, and it's time this story was told.